Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and The Big Thing. It's the show where we take a deep dive on a big story in the beautiful game. On this episode, we're focusing our attention on Real Madrid and their coaching situation. As you're no doubt aware, Xabi Alonso departed the club by mutual consent on Monday following defeat at the Super Cup Clásico, bringing to an end a brief and slightly disappointing coaching tenure. We're going to look at what went wrong, why he was hired in the first place, what his friend Arvelo Arbeloa is going to bring, and what their long-term coaching plans are, if there are any. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, hello Taylor Rocco, how are you?
I am well, Ryan Bailey. I have not been fired unceremoniously by Real Madrid or had a forced parting of ways. So at the very least, I'm doing better than Xabi Alonso right now.
Maybe that's in the future for you. Don't give up.
You never know. I mean, at the rate they're cycling through managers, you never know.
Yeah, your turn will come indeed. Joe Lowry, hello, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. That whole parting by mutual consent thing is so funny, Taylor. I totally agree. Like, that's just obviously not true. Like, if there was mutual consent, this would have gone down so much differently. Clearly, Real Madrid was like, hey, Xabi, if you don't say that you're leaving by mutual consent, we are for reals going to fire you and drag your name through the mud. And then he has no other choice but to leave. I find the framing of all this to be hilarious.
Yeah. As I understand it, Joe, sometimes it's written into the contract that if sacked, they can't dispute the PR around it, so that it has to you have to go along with it to make sure you get your full payout. I don't know if that was the case here because Xabi Alonso has not really towed that line in the way he's been acting.
I don't know. I think there could be a scenario where Alonso walked into the office. They said, "We want to fire you," and he said, "Oh, great! I wanted to be fired." And they just hug and then they walk away.
The Ruben Amorim.
That's it.
Yeah, there you go. That could happen. Mutual consent. Graham Rutherford, hello.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. Yeah, I'm interested in how they convey this whole story in the movie retelling of this season at Real Madrid. Of course, Xabi Alonso will be played by Jason Bateman. Of course, they're the same person. Nobody's seen them in the same room.
Correct.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Very good. Will it be all dark like Ozarky, do you think? I think.
Yeah, it has to be. Jason Bateman will play the same character he's played in every single thing he's been in since Dodgeball. Brian Cox will be Florentino Perez. It'll be great fun.
Why is Xabi Alonso calling everyone pal? This is weird. Anyway.
That seems like a pitch for a movie that I would not want to see and then slowly really want to see. Similar to Moneyball. Like Moneyball on paper, I was like, I don't know how you make that into a movie. I think young and exciting manager coming into his former club to reinvigorate and revolutionize and then very quickly falling out. It's basically The Damned United Part 2, isn't it?
They can get whoever did the Saipan, the Roy Keane and Mick McCarthy movie, which I haven't seen, gets terrible reviews, and I can't wait to watch it. They can just it can be like a sequel. It can be like True Detective. There'd be a football and True Detective, different cast, different story, and you just keep going round.
I like that.
There we go. TSS Productions has got another idea on the board. We're going to have to start producing some of these at some point.
TM.
There we go. Yeah. No one can take it. It's ours. Unless we give it to you by mutual consent. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is where you'll find our bonus content. You'll get bonus episodes, bonus video, and access to our Discord. Come and join us. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. And, of course, a thank you to our community who supports us via that medium. Let's get into it, shall we? Xabi Alonso fired at Real Madrid after 233 sweet days in charge. A coach, of course, who showed so much promise in his tenure at Bayer Leverkusen in the Bundesliga. But his tenure here in Spain, in Spain, was marked by some big losses, I'd say. The Man City loss, the Liverpool loss in the Champions League, the derby defeat to Atletico Madrid, being beaten at home by Celta Vigo that time was a bit of an indignity for the team. But Graham, it's interesting, his win percentage, I saw on an ESPN article, his win percentage, 70.6%. He's had the sixth best record in club history for a coach.
Yeah.
So, I'd ask why he was fired as Real Madrid manager. Obviously, there are quite a few reasons, and it wasn't working out. But on those numbers, it wasn't a dreadful reign.
Yeah, I mean, at surface level, Real Madrid are still very much within touching distance of Barcelona at the top of La Liga. They're still very much in Champions League contention. And I think the final game against Barcelona in the Super Cup, which they obviously lost, but only lost 3-2 and had drawn level in that game, that's kind of indicative of where Real Madrid are right now as a team. They're not great, but they're equally not bad as a team. But there were two parts to this Alonso at Real Madrid story. And obviously they're linked and there's overlap. But one part is the on-field stuff, which was largely underwhelming. Like Real Madrid want to be top of La Liga. They want to be running away with the title. They want to have won every game in the Champions League, and clearly they're not doing that. Although they did win 10 of their first 11 league games under Xabi Alonso. They beat Barcelona in the Clásico during that run, which I thought was their best performance under Xabi Alonso. And I remember we spoke about how Real Madrid played in that game, and they were the better team, and they pressed like well enough in that match, and they were decent on the ball, and it felt like they were moving forward finally in terms of their style, not just in terms of results. But then you have the other part of the story, and it was poetic that during that good performance against Barcelona, that the off-field stuff bubbled to the surface, right? You had the Vinicius Junior substitution towards the end of that game, and he blew up in that moment, and he shouted at Alonso that he was leaving the club, and he went straight up the tunnel. And obviously that was a sign of a situation that had already existed before then, but that was the first time we'd seen it boil over on the pitch. And from that moment, you had Vinicius telling Real Madrid that he wouldn't be signing a new contract as long as Alonso was manager, and the disgruntlement, it seems like, grew from there and involved players like Mbappe. Obviously, we saw after the game in the Super Cup the scenes of Mbappe basically overruling Alonso, and Alonso wanted the players to go over and give Barcelona a guard of honour after the game, and Mbappe sort of ushered the players off and kind of showed Alonso who was boss, and the optics of that were terrible, and frankly it seems like the off-the-field stuff has played the biggest role in this all coming crashing down around Xabi Alonso's ears.
Yep. As with most things, and things of this size especially, I think there's lots of truths that can be the truth simultaneously. But the biggest one is, I think, the personality management has been borderline impossible for Xabi Alonso for myriad reasons. And I think Graham is right to spotlight Vinicius for a moment, because with some of the criticism earlier in the season, from what I've read, there was an expectation from the squad that there would be, if not a suspension, then some sort of punishment, some sort of fine when he spoke out publicly, and there wasn't. That seems to have laid the groundwork for, well, if he's not going to be in trouble for criticizing the manager and being frustrated by the way we're playing, then why shouldn't I do that? And it kind of opens that door a little bit. I have been sort of flummoxed by how much Madrid seemed to have backed Vinicius over Xabi Alonso at times. Florentino Perez especially seems to have done that, forgetting, until I listened to the Athletic FC today, that this is the same Vinicius that when he doesn't win the Ballon d'Or, the entire Madrid organization refuses to go to the ceremony. Like, it's a player that they have very publicly backed on a massive scale. And so I think to come to this point, maybe that could have been a seismic shift in which Perez backs the manager and things change. But it felt like really quickly he decided Xabi Alonso isn't the guy. He doesn't have the man management skill, or the Galactico management skill, rather. And so this isn't going to work. And I have a ton of sympathy for Xabi Alonso, because I don't understand how you hire him and expect him to be anything but what he was at Bayer Leverkusen. Maybe they thought he would be more familiar with the Real Madrid identity and the Galactico identity at that, but it seems to have been set up to fail from the jump.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think that is a really good top-down read of the situation, Taylor. On Vinicius Jr., I don't think it should surprise any of us that the club is back Vinicius Jr., not just because we have evidence of it already happening with the Ballon d'Or thing, which is hilarious, by the way. If your ego is so fragile that you have to be named the winner of this made-up award that really doesn't matter at all, my word. But the other reason we shouldn't be surprised that Real Madrid backed Vinicius Jr. and backs their players is that one of the parties, Vinicius Jr. or Xabi Alonso, you can sell for 150 million euros, and the other party you cannot. And ultimately, that is, I think, a great summary of Real Madrid. Taylor, you brought up the Galactico thing. This is Real Madrid in hiring Xabi Alonso, part of Real Madrid wanting to modernize. And Xabi Alonso's in that group where he wants to do more systemic things on the field and wants to do more video and all those things. The folks that bring Xabi Alonso in, notably not Florentino Perez, at least that was not his idea, wanting to modernize the club as well and go out and hire a coach that we saw at Bayer Leverkusen have some really interesting ideas on the field to bring this team forward, kicking and screaming, into the 21st century. And it's ultimately that part of Real Madrid, the Alonso part of Real Madrid, his backers at Real Madrid, maybe a few players at Real Madrid, that is just outvoted and outpowered by Florentino Perez and all of the players. And ultimately the culture that has been created at Real Madrid for decades, which is this is a club for stars. And we allow stars to have a lot of leeway. They can bring extra people outside the club onto the training ground, which Xabi Alonso didn't like and wanted to cut down on some of those things. Seems reasonable enough to me. But the players ultimately have the authority because they're given that authority, and the culture at the club is that they have that authority. And Xabi Alonso couldn't knock that down. It wasn't adaptable enough to stay in the job anyway. This was the challenge, I think, for Alonso at Real Madrid, and that's why he's gone.
Yeah, and one thing that Alonso wasn't able to overcome in these short 7 months was, Joe, you say Perez wanted to modernise. I think Real Madrid wanted to modernise, but actually Perez,
maybe I misspoke. I don't think Perez wanted to modernise at all. It wasn't his idea to bring in Xabi Alonso or any of those things.
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't trying to sort of disagree with that point. I was just wanting to make the distinction that David Ornstein was saying that Florentino Perez had to be spoken into or talked into hiring Xabi Alonso in the first place by some of the directors who made the argument that Real Madrid should modernise, which I think is a reasonable argument to make. But Florentino Perez is stubborn. I don't know if you know that about Florentino Perez. And so this was an opportunity for him to say, see, I was right all along. Real Madrid are a different club, which he might have a point there. Like, they do seem to be an anomaly in modern soccer. And so the runway for Xabi Alonso was always likely to be shorter at Real Madrid than it would have been at other clubs. And we've kind of spoken about a whole bunch of managers in the last couple of weeks. And I think there's been like a sliding scale of Ruben Amorim. I was very critical of Ruben Amorim. I think he was largely to blame for how things blew up towards the end of his time at Manchester United. We've spoken about Wilfred Nancy. I think it's somewhere in between there, where there was blame on Celtic's side and there was also blame on Wilfred Nancy's side. I'm not really sure what Xabi Alonso could have done differently here, because we've argued with other managers, Ruben Amorim, well, maybe he should have made some concessions to introduce his ideas slowly. That's what Xabi Alonso did here. He rolled back after that Barcelona game, which is just funny that that Real Madrid had a match where they beat Barcelona in the Clásico. They played well. You could see their ideas coming to the fore, and Real Madrid's players went, nah, that's enough of that. Yeah. And Xabi Alonso had no choice to kind of roll it back into prime Ancelotti ball. But that in itself has kind of killed him. So I have full sympathy with Xabi Alonso. This was a mistake. The only mistake that he made was taking this job. Other than that, I'm not sure how he could have done anything differently.
To go with an analogy that maybe only Joe will get, maybe Ryan will get this one, but it would be from an American perspective, like the Pittsburgh Steelers having just parted ways with Mike Tomlin, only their third coach since like the moon landing, and that's a true thing. And like they are a hard-nosed, hard-scrabbled organization, has success and the like. And it would be like if they brought in Mike McDaniel for the Miami Dolphins to run this like newfangled offense with all of these analytics and different ideas, and then after one game being like, well, this isn't hard-nosed, gritty football. What are you doing? Like it's just sort of like, yeah, that was not what you were hiring. Why did you think this would work? And so even there, the idea of him, Xabi Alonso, adjusting his tactics and adjusting his ideas, that seems to have been like he was making them watch film. What is this guy, a monster? And a lot of it by all accounts, but like that's the idea, is you prep for your opponent, you drill really, really well, you drill to their vulnerabilities and then try to limit their strengths, and you come into a game really prepped and then you win, and that's what they did at Bayer Leverkusen. Now we know Bayer Leverkusen and Real Madrid definitively not the same level of profile and pedigree when it comes to player power, because it seems like the players just did not want to do that, wanted the Carlo Ancelotti approach, even though they previously did not want the Carlo Ancelotti approach anymore. And so here we are.
So is Real Madrid's culture basically stubbornness? Because you remember that quote a few weeks ago where the dietitian mentioned about,
yes.
Was it something about eating pastries in the morning? And
yes.
the dietitian said, maybe you shouldn't do that. And they were like, don't make me tap the sign that says we've won Champions Leagues eating pastries every morning. And
dude,
they just
Ryan,
won't change.
To your point, like when my daughter, my 5-year-old daughter, is in a very bad mood and I like force her to apologize to her sister for being mean, she'll give the same hug that Florentino Perez didn't give Xabi Alonso at the end of the Barcelona game this weekend. Just sort of like, no, I'm not hugging you. I'm leaning away and I'm mad. And it was just sort of like, wow, that is the like embodiment and personification of stubbornness right there. Like you can't even publicly be like, hey, it's okay, man. That just, the writing was on the wall very clearly at that point. But yes, they do seem to be very about their DNA, about their identity. And I mean, to their credit, even though they have these downturns in form, even though they have this level of chaos, they make more money than any football club in the world. They have had more success, at least in Europe, than any club in the world. I mean, there is a reason for them to tap the sign. At the same time, it does feel a little bit... Graham and I are recording a Soccer 101 episode this week about like why there aren't more English managers. And I can't help but connect those ideas that like English football kind of rested on its laurels, had this identity of who it was and what we're going to be. And then the rest of the world kind of did their own thing, and suddenly England was like, wait, what now? You guys like play 4-3-3 and have the ball? Well, what's this now? No. And it feels like Real Madrid at some point will have to kind of face that like dramatic difference, but right now it doesn't seem like they're wanting to do that.
Alvaro Arbeloa, who we'll get into later, his name is surprisingly difficult for me to say this morning.
Really is.
His quote was, "This club is about winning, winning, and winning again. It's in our DNA."
And he won his first game?
We'll get into that.
Starting now.
because-
Starting now.
Yes.
Winning starting now.
No give back. Starting now. I don't think winning is a DNA. We can probably get into that later because that's not a thing. But yeah, it's interesting that there is this unique culture, this cultureless culture at Real Madrid, I think is maybe a way we could describe it. Anyway, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we should dig into what went wrong or right on the pitch for Alonso, what's coming from Arbeloa, and much more. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to the big thing. We're talking all things Real Madrid and their coaching situation. Graham, can we touch on the on-the-field stuff for a minute under Alonso? What went right for him? We obviously know the style he had at Bayer Leverkusen, and you mentioned about sort of trying to gently introduce some concepts which were rebuffed, shall we say.
Yeah.
So what did he try and do on the field? What did he succeed at and what failed?
I think you can split Xabi Alonso's time at Real Madrid into two parts. So the first half of that tenure is when he's trying to introduce those ideas. Second half is when he's making concessions to players and kind of rolling things back to get them back on side, which went really well for him, of course. But to understand some of the things that he did succeed in the first half, I think you need to understand the issues that Real Madrid had. And I think there are two big issues more than anything else. Neither of them are surprising because we've spoken about them regularly over the last couple seasons with Real Madrid. The first one is pressing. This is not a team that likes to press, and obviously that word and that concept has been such a big thing in modern soccer in the last 10 years, you would say. And so Real Madrid had this idea that bringing Xabi Alonso in would somehow magically get them to become a pressing team. The difficulty is Real Madrid have a top-heavy squad full of players with big egos who are unwilling to press. You've got Mbappe, Vinicius, Bellingham, possibly Rodrigo to a slightly lesser extent as well, but none of them want to do the hard work out of possession. But all of them expect to play, and if they're not playing, then they'll let you know about it. So in that first half, when Xabi Alonso felt like he had license to make some big calls, we saw players like Mastantuono starting on the right side. Now, Mastantuono, brought in from River Plate in the summer, played at the Club World Cup, I believe. He is raw. He is still a sort of developmental player on the ball in terms of his creativity. But out of possession, he works much harder than a lot of those other Real Madrid attackers. And so that's why he was in the team. We saw Arda Güler looking at the second issue, which was Real Madrid's lack of a ball-playing central midfielder since Toni Kroos has retired. That's been a big issue for them. And so Xabi Alonso, he tried Arda Güler in that position at the Club World Cup, found that he didn't really have the sort of natural defensive instincts, moved him slightly higher up the field. He tried in a couple games with Trent Alexander-Arnold, either as an out-and-out central midfielder or as a right back who would then or a right wing back who would then move in possession would move into the centre of their field, and that was designed to solve that issue. But ultimately, Xabi Alonso lost the license as he lost the egos in the team for him to do those things, and so that's where I think things started to get away from him.
Given the win percentage and that he didn't do terribly in this job, although obviously he had some misgivings, do you think he'd still be in the job if it was more fun to watch?
No, to be honest, I really don't think so. I kind of agree with what Taylor said back in the first segment, which is this has come to me to feel like it was doomed from the start, where unless Xabi Alonso had come in and immediately changed who he was as a coach, and maybe he would have gotten the job if he had done that, maybe he wouldn't have if he told them in the interviews beforehand or the conversations beforehand that he was going to shift everything. Maybe something looks different there, but this to me feels first and foremost like things were broken behind the scenes and then a gigantic drop-off from that point to the next point and the next major factor of why Alonso is no longer in the post. And then you get to the on-field things. Now, of course, there is bleed from the off-field stuff to the on-field stuff. But really, I don't know that Real Madrid were especially dull to watch. They have the best expected goal differential in La Liga. They still create a bunch of chances. They still score lots of goals. They still have fun players. I just don't think this was ever truly going to click once it actually got going. And I'll hold my hands up and say, I was wrong about this. I was really legitimately excited to see what a Xabi Alonso Real Madrid team would do with all of the fun, interesting pieces and parts that they brought in over the summer, mixed with the players that they already had. A lot of flexible players like Bellingham and Valverde. How did these all fit together? And it seems like the answer was either they just don't fit together, or at least Xabi Alonso can't get them to fit together while he's also trying to put out 8,000 fires off the field. I also have a lot of sympathy for the guy.
Yeah, he was doomed from the moment they gave him this squad to work with. I mean, retrospectively, Real Madrid should have sold Vinicius in the summer, which they were never, ever going to do. but they could have got a world record fee for him from a Saudi club. Saudi clubs have kind of trailed him for the last couple of years. Obviously, Vinicius is a great player, but Mbappe is better. And if Real Madrid were genuine, which clearly they weren't, but if they were genuine about becoming a more proactive and intense team and modern team, as we've already said, you can't have all those players in the same team. And Vinicius is the one that you could use that money to then reinvest elsewhere in the squad. But with this squad, it was just never going to work. Frankly, I don't know what works with this squad. Like, it's kind of the PSG problem all over again, where they had Messi and Neymar and Mbappe as that front three, and ultimately it was just too top heavy. Like, Real Madrid may win just through having such talent. They might win another La Liga title with this team. I would actually bet that they do at some point. But in terms of beating the strongest opposition from around Europe in the Champions League, which is ultimately what they want to win, I just don't see what approach they use with these players that works. And that's why Arbeloa has come in, because he is someone who's not going to he's not going to have the license that Xabi Alonso had, at least for the first half of his tenure, and will basically go with the vibes, the vibe style of play that these players clearly want.
And he's also, I think, like pretty well connected to Florentino Perez. Yeah. From what I've read and heard, he is a guy who, like, in his playing career, would publicly talk about how officials favored Barcelona and how there's a bias against Real Madrid. And I think he, at least in the past, like, facilitates some of that narrative that Florentino Perez loves when things aren't going well. And so I think in that way, he comes in as a coach who can sort of have a nobody believes in us, everyone's against us, backs against the wall sort of leadership style that maybe springs a response. It didn't in his first game, so there is that to be considered. But I really don't know how they fix this. And then at the same time, to your point, Graham, it's a team that still has like 3-4 potential Ballon d'Or winners in it. And you look at the Clasico before Xabi Alonso's fired, and he starts basically all those attackers. People still aren't that impressed by it, but they do like play well, and they come close to getting a result there, as you said. So it feels like even just putting all that talent on the pitch, you can spring surprises and get results. It just feels like against teams that are drilled and organized and have lots of different ways they want to play, it's going to fall apart pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, the reality for Real Madrid is they're in the same place that they've been, more or less, right? And Graham, I take your specific point about, well, with Mbappe and Vinicius and some of these other pieces, it does feel a bit like PSG, and that team fell short of ultimately accomplishing what they set out to do. Real Madrid is what they've been, and they're going to continue being this way, right? I mean, I don't see any way that changes. Xabi Alonso was such a reasonable fit to try to modernize this club, where he had connections to the club. He was very successful at Bayer Leverkusen. He had been selective in choosing the right opportunities for him throughout his career on the coaching side of things. It all seemed to make sense, and that's why I was so excited about this, because as someone who likes more structured, sort of logical soccer, Real Madrid are always this kind of frustrating thing that you can't ignore over in the corner that succeed based off of talent, and that's mostly it. That's what Real Madrid are going back to, and they can still have a ton of success that way, because you know what? They attract some of the best players in the world at every single position on the field. I mean, their squad is so good that if they can figure out the defensive stuff, which is a huge question mark. I mean, maybe it is really just they sit a little bit deeper and they try not to mess things up so much in their own half. But if they can figure that out, they could still win the Champions League this year. Like, I mean, I don't doubt their ceiling as a team, and I don't think anybody should have ever doubted, at least most good versions of Real Madrid over the last decade plus, this team's ability to go out and win stuff. It's just fascinating to me how quickly they entertained and then immediately ditched the idea of trying to become something different. I don't know that Real Madrid have to become something different as well. Like, clearly they didn't like it, and it didn't work for them in their own weird, specific, self-induced kind of way. I don't think they necessarily have to change either, as long as they keep attracting one of the 3 best players in the world at every single position on the field. They're still going to win a lot of stuff that way.
Yeah. I think for me, it at least throws into very stark contrast or very clear picture, like how difficult it is to be Real Madrid manager. Because Xabi Alonso was exceptional at Bayer Leverkusen. We talked about it plenty. We talked about how good he was, how good of a response he got from that club, from that team, to be able to beat Bayern Munich. But then, like, I guess I wasn't, again, this is another podcast point that was made, is like, I didn't realize how small Leverkusen, the city, actually is. It is, like, I think only like half the size of Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah,
like, it is not a big place. It is very much on the outskirts of Köln, which is the larger city. It's not a place where you're going to get like super duper stars and super duper personalities playing. You know, it's a factory club first and foremost that then obviously has gone on to prominence and success. But it's not Real Madrid. And so I just picture the scenario in which Xabi Alonso then goes from that, where he has all authority to make all decisions and do whatever he wants, and he can bench whomever he needs to bench if they're not playing to the level, and he can bring somebody else in and challenge them for that starting spot, and it gets a response, or at the very least, it creates competitiveness within the squad. And he goes to Real Madrid, where it just seems like he was like, okay, well, now, Vinny, you're going to have to press a little bit, and the response to that is just like, no. And then he goes to Florentino Perez and says, like, hey, he won't press. And he's like, yeah, figure it out. Like, it's just really clear how much that manager has to navigate personality more than tactics, more than anything else. It seems like that's what Carlo Ancelotti was exceptionally good at, in being very sort of humble and laid back in his approach and letting players kind of dictate what they wanted to do and then finding ways to make that work. I think if you're coming in with grandiose ideas, or not even grandiose ideas, just like practical ideas about how to play in the modern game, if that doesn't suit what the Stars want, I think you're in for some trouble.
It's shocking to me how little authority Xabi Alonso had with these players, considering he's Xabi Alonso, like one of the most legendary, because that was always the thing with Zidane, right? Like, maybe we were doing Zidane a disservice, but we all thought one of the key reasons he was successful at Real Madrid was he was Zidane, and he had that aura, and he could convince players to buy in to whatever he was doing. But it just didn't seem like they cared at all about who Xabi Alonso was, who, just to recap, one of the most legendary midfielders of his generation, played for Real Madrid, Bayern, Liverpool, played under Pep, Mourinho, like everyone you could imagine. And even as a manager, like, if they asked Xabi Alonso, what have you done as a manager? He'd led Leverkusen to the Bundesliga, like one of the most incredible things in European football. Right? And they just did not care. So I think that raises questions about how much authority Arbeloa's going to have, because I've seen the Zidane comparison made a few times, where obviously Zidane had been at Castilla. Do you know who else was hired from Castilla to be Real Madrid manager? Santi Solari, and he lasted 2 months. And I think that's the way I'm sort of leaning with Arbeloa in this job.
Oh boy,
it's two things there, Graham. I think, like, to emphasize the player part of Xabi Alonso for a moment, a point I saw made is that he broke up the Iniesta, Busquets, Xavi midfield for Spain. Like, he starts in that midfield. That's how good he was at a time when that's the dominant midfield. But then you look at who he had at Real Madrid, and it is also very interesting, because he has Manuel Pellegrini as his first manager. Then he has Jose for 3 seasons, and that has to shape the way he understands Real Madrid and the way they play and their sort of identity. And then that final season for him at Real Madrid is with Carlo Ancelotti. So he gets kind of a mixture of the two approaches. And I wonder if he thought maybe a mixture of those two approaches would be a thing that could work, given his profile and pedigree and success as a manager. Turns out it could not.
We'll dig into Arbeloa very shortly, but before we leave Alonso, do we think his stock has actually gone down? I don't think it really necessarily has in this instance. Like, do we think he's going to get a... Oh, God, it's just occurred to me, he could go to West Ham. He's not going to do that, is he?
He's not going to.
It hasn't gone down that far. That's for sure. Even if it has gone down, it hasn't gone down that far. I mean, I don't think so. Right? In any of this, not just. I don't think so to the West Ham thing. I don't think so to your actual question. I think Xabi Alonso is going to be remembered for his Leverkusen time in a way that he's not going to be remembered for his Real Madrid time, because Real Madrid are sort of one of one now, where maybe before it was Real Madrid and PSG who are both trying to star their way to trophies without having a really logical squad balance and having a coach that wants to impose some tactical ideas on the squad. Now among the big clubs, like the truly big clubs, Real Madrid are the only one. And so I don't really think any of these other clubs are going to be hiring based off of what the outlier is doing in Real Madrid. I think they're going to be hiring based off of Bayer Leverkusen and Alonso's system in that sort of way, much more so. And in a weird way, I can actually imagine a world where this job and this experience has made Xabi Alonso a more appealing candidate to some places, because he's now coached some of the types of players that he's probably going to be walking into at his next job, if it is at a high-level Premier League club or somewhere else in Europe. I think he's got a little bit more actually to him in terms of depth as a coach now than he did before, even if he learned those things at Real Madrid while the whole thing crashed and burned, and he played some part in that.
I think it will be a similar scenario to Pochettino at PSG, or PSG in general. To draw the PSG comparison again, like Pochettino comes out of that job, nobody blames him for how that goes, because it's an absolute viper's nest of a club, and he gets the Chelsea job after coming out of PSG. Chelsea as a club as well had
Graham.
numerous. Go on, Taylor.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think his time at Real Madrid will be remembered the same way that we're going to remember Maresca's time at Chelsea, or De Zerbi's time at Chelsea, or Tuchel's time at Chelsea, or Pochettino's time at Chelsea. Like,
Senior's
it
time
feels
at Chelsea.
slightly similar in that way.
Yeah, there are clubs like this, and I don't think anything or much of what happened at Real Madrid is going to stick to Xabi Alonso. What I will say is, he does need to take more care with picking his next job, because if the same thing happens or similar things happen, then that will start to stick. And that's one of the most confusing aspects of this, and I think Joe referenced this earlier. Alonso was so careful to wait for the right opportunity before taking over at Bayer Leverkusen. He was Real Sociedad B manager. He was highly rated. I think he came close to the Gladbach job and then decided, nope, that wasn't for him. I think Wolfsburg tried to get him as well. And he waited for Leverkusen. And then he also waited in the summer of 2024. He could have had the Liverpool job. He could have had the Bayern Munich job. He turns those down. And then he decides the right next step for him is Real Madrid. I'll never fully understand that. So that's the one sort of black mark against him, is I don't understand the thought process there, and the thought process on his next job needs to be clearer.
Is it,
Graham.
maybe there's a human side to that, though, isn't there, Graham? If you've worked at that place for a number of years and your family's familiar with it and you get to go back and you know it's a huge job, it's hard to turn down, isn't it?
Famously, he didn't play for Liverpool or Bayern either, and that's why he turned those jobs down.
Graham,
I've
got a pitch for you.
Yeah, I was being facetious, but yes, that surely the lure of Real Madrid is well known for players and for managers.
Yeah.
Graham, I've got a pitch for you. There's a team, they're going to need a manager this summer. They're less heralded on the global stage, so I feel like they're not going to bring as many egos to the equation. But there will be players that want to work really, really hard, that will respect his success, and I think he'll be able to mold them into his identity. USA? Xabi Alonso,
man,
USA
that's not where I
manager?
thought you were
Come
gonna go.
on.
That'd be
You thought I was
delightful.
going United, but no.
I mean, that would be great,
Delightful.
but probably not.
USA. No? Nobody wants
All right,
to
it's
chant
time for a
with me?
break.
All right, fine.
Let's go to a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dig into Alvaro Arbeloa, what we know about him so far, and what we see the future as it pertains to the Real Madrid managerial position. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to the big thing. Let's go in on Alvaro Arbeloa then. Obviously, we know him as a fellow, I suppose, Liverpool legend along with Xabi Alonso.
Is that what Madrid's going to say in 3 weeks from now? Let's all go in on Arbeloa? I feel like that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Or maybe they'll be like, who?
Oh, that
Could
guy
be.
who was here for 2 weeks? All right, sweet.
Oh, that guy. All right. I remember him vaguely. So obviously established playing career along with Xabi Alonso. That's at least two of the same clubs. Came through to Castilla as well. I mentioned his quote about this club is about winning, winning, and winning again. How did that go in his first game earlier this week? Albacete, it was...
Losing, and losing again, I think is what it was.
I
no
felt
DNA there.
I felt so bad for him that he had to come into the locker room and say, this is all on me. This is my fault, which is what he said. But it
I
was
saw
just
that as well.
I've been here for 12 minutes. This is all my creation. I've got to figure this out, guys. I feel bad for him because it's a thankless job, not least because we've already talked about Zidane. And, Pep is kind of the same thing where you have somebody who, comes in because the manager ahead of them wasn't working, and then it just clicks spectacularly. There is massive success. And so you can always look to that if you are Real Madrid as it could be, it's happened before. But I think Arbeloa could very well get a response and get everybody kind of playing a style of soccer that works for them, for the talent they have. But it still just feels like the problems that we've already talked about are going to be there. It feels like a really thankless position because if he does well, maybe that gives him credit, but it feels like in the end it's just it's a lot of the personalities who succeeded. And then if he doesn't, it's his fault. It's not the player's fault. Out the door you go.
Yeah, I knew almost nothing about Arbeloa as a coach. You see his name mentioned as Castilla manager every so often, but according to a BBC article that I read, quote, he favours a 4-3-3 formation, emphasises a high press, and encourages an aggressive attacking approach out of possession as well. He prefers to play with wingers on their opposite flanks. Yeah, good luck with a lot of those things. The high press part in particular, and the aggressive out of possession approach. That's going to go well for you.
The thing is, every coach says that, and obviously that's not what's going to happen here with Arbeloa. He would be a fool to have that happen, and I don't imagine he's a fool at this stage. I want to go back to something, Taylor, you said, I think, in the last segment about how difficult it is to manage Real Madrid. Mm-hmm. I think you're right, in a sense, about that, to be clear. I think managing the situation and managing the personalities both down from you and up from you in the org chart is got to be really difficult. in a tactical sense, is it difficult to manage Real Madrid? I mean, maybe this version of Real Madrid more than some others in the past, because how do you really compensate for an Mbappe, Vinny Jr. sort of front line, front left? And there's a lot of nebulous kind of profiles in this team.
Where they're effectively
really
holding hands next to each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all that being said, is not the job of Real Madrid manager, as dictated by Florentino Perez and how quickly he jettisoned Xabi Alonso, to just be a babysitter. Is that not the job? Sort of like how we've talked about Inter Miami's managerial position, where you trot out the lineup that you're expected to trot out, and what happens from there is pretty much not up to you anymore. I mean, that is oversimplifying what Carlo Ancelotti and Zidane did tactically with this team. I'm not trying to say that they didn't have any tactical input or didn't make any important decisions. But really, the hallmark of both of those coaches was that they didn't blow up the locker room, or at least that the locker room didn't blow up under them. So I'm not saying that Arbeloa is going to succeed, or whoever the next coach is going to succeed. I don't know what's going to happen on that front. But I don't really know that truly coaching Real Madrid is a difficult job, as long as you don't put your foot in your mouth and tell a player that you don't have authority over to do something that they don't want to do.
But I mean, that's what coaching is, right? Like, players have to
Not
do
at
things
Real Madrid.
they have to do things they don't want to do. Like that is part of being in a team. That is part of being able to win. Is that like one of the I think Jose Mourinho's crowning achievements is getting Samuel Eto'o to play as a wingback in a game, basically, because that's what was required to get the result, and he did it and did it well. That's not a guy who's going to go out there and work his socks off like for the glory of the team necessarily, but he did it in that way. And I think that's part of why Jose is brought into Real Madrid in the first place, because there's an idea that maybe he can manage those egos, and he brings such an ego himself. I think that is ultimately the thing that I don't know how you get past is you have to navigate the egos of the players. You have to still have your own ability to exert some level of control, but ultimately you also have to answer to Daddy Perez. And that is part of what I think went wrong here, is that he sees himself, in my opinion, as Real Madrid. Like, he is the person who's made these decisions. He is the person who has the Galacticos policy and has the towers that he points to for Gareth Bale and David Beckham. And so I think if you come in and challenge that identity, or make him feel like you're challenging that, make him feel like you are coming in and saying, no, this is how Real Madrid should play, you're immediately on the wrong side. And I think he has very little patience for that. My guess would be that with Arbeloa, with everything Graham said about the way he wants to play and the style he plays, Perez doesn't care, because ultimately it's like, yeah, but that's a guy I can say I brought in, and I made the team, and I made him. And I think to have to navigate that owner plus those egos while still playing cohesive soccer, that when you're down 1-0 at halftime, you can say, hey, I'm subbing you off because we can't have 4 attackers right now. We have to find a way to make this work. And if the player says no, or if the player throws a fit and then everybody backs him, you just instantly lose authority. You instantly lose that connection to the team. And so I guess you're right, Joe, that ultimately, like, the tactics side of thing can be somewhat easy because you have the talent you do. But it is about ego management and man management. Yep. And those players. It keeps reminding me of the Ryan from The Office quote of, like, I want someone who will lead me. Lead me when I feel like being led in the way that I want to be led. Like, that's what it seems like ultimately for me.
No, okay, so I want to ask you a question on the back of that, Taylor. Because I think we agree in that, in a macro sense, the situation for Real Madrid is not different compared to what they've been under Perez and the Galacticos. This is just the newest version of that with these group of players. And so the point that I was raising is that the job of the Real Madrid manager is really the same as it's been for a really long time, which is somehow babysit things enough that things don't blow up and let the talented players go out, minimizing the chaos around them, let them go out there and win you games. Right? That is the summary of what it is to be the Real Madrid coach. I believe that firmly. And I don't know that many people would really argue with that. Is the distinction you're making is that with this particular version of Real Madrid, that it's harder to do, that when Mbappe's joined, they're not on track to win the title this year, and they didn't win the title last year. So it's impossible? Or are you trying to make a broader point about Real Madrid and that post in general, regardless of who the specific stars are? Because that second bit wouldn't hold water for me. But I could believe that any coach basically with this squad is doomed, because there's actually not a way to manage all these egos, because there's too many of them that want to be on the field together in a way that past versions of Real Madrid haven't had to deal with.
I think eventually doomed. Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, is like, you might have short-term success, but like Ancelotti has shown the door twice. Zidane has shown the door twice. Like, I think at a certain point...
but they won Champions Leagues along the way, so you can tolerate that, right?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I think you can, but I think it continues to be the same problem over and over again, where you're spending more money to have more players that want their way of playing and their identity to be the identity of Real Madrid. Maybe it is the age-old problem, but for me, I think it's exacerbated by just how much of this they've kind of forced themselves into by wanting to still have the Galactico approach. And Kylian Mbappe is the example of this. And that signing didn't make sense to me when it happened. I didn't get how Xabi Alonso was going to make this work when he was announced. And it feels like they've kind of backed themselves into this corner where you have a locker room divide that I think is being somewhat glossed over by the news of Xabi Alonso and then Arbeloa coming in. But it seems pretty clear that there was a divide between like Mbappe and some players, and then like the Vinicius side. Bellingham seems to have been on the Vinicius side. Fede Valverde seems to have been there as well, which is surprising to me. It just seems like it is a locker room that is more chaotic than it's been in some time, and has more of an individualistic identity than I think it has had, personally, than even some of those Galactico teams that had ridiculous personalities on them. There still seems to have been a, hey, but ultimately we all just want to win and be the best team in the world. It feels like this particular Real Madrid iteration is, we want to win and be the best team in the world, but I am the main star of that. I am the main character. And when you have four people who think they're the main character, I don't know how you manage it.
I think the difficult part, or the most difficult part, is Joe. I hear what you're saying, but like, who is that person? Like Ancelotti, we've spoken about Real Madrid being one of one. Ancelotti was kind of one on one in that sense, where, to go back to some of the things David Ornstein was saying on a podcast I listened he was on, he was telling a story of, in the Champions League final, the last one that Real Madrid won against Dortmund, that Toni Kroos and Dani Carvajal led the team talks, came up with the tactics, and that was common for Real Madrid to have this sort of this conference ahead of games and say, right, what do we want to do during this game? And that is so at odds with everything elsewhere in the modern game, where everything is so like detail-led, where Unai Emery is giving Aston Villa players like dossiers of homework between games, and you've got Pep Guardiola. Like, that's such at odds with everything else that we see. So who is that person? And clearly Real Madrid don't have great faith that Arbeloa is going to be that person, because unless I'm missing something, there's been no confirmation of what length his contract is. So even though he is he's the permanent manager, I think they are very much keeping their options open. And there's no process at Real Madrid. Like, Jurgen Klopp has been linked pretty strongly with this job. Now, I think he'd be crazy to take this job. He's got nothing to gain, in my opinion, from taking this job. But Real Madrid are so lacking in process that they'll hire Jurgen Klopp just because he's Jurgen Klopp. And that's where I find it very, very difficult to project what comes next for this team.
I might push back on the Trivago guy thing there, Graham, because you could argue that any coach who's had many payouts and been fired many times, they'd all be crazy to take another job. But they all take other jobs. None of them have to work anymore. They all do it because they want to sort of prove themselves again. And if Jurgen Klopp is going to go anywhere in the world, surely it's Real Madrid is the platform for him.
I know I'm the outlier here. I have never understood that. It seems like a poison chalice. And Joe, you make a very valid point, and it's a difficult one to come back from. That, like, yeah, but they win the Champions League. Like, you win the Champions League 3 times. Aren't you the best club in the world? Doesn't this make sense? I think for me, it always feels chaotic. It always feels like it's on the verge of melting down, and it doesn't thus far. So, like, I am wrong in that way. But for me, it makes me uneasy. It goes against everything we understand about modern sports and how you run a club and how you have success as a club in every sport. That, like, when you are firing, I mean, they're like, what Real Madrid does is like what the Browns do. Is like fire your coach every single time things go wrong. Keep bringing in superstars. We'll find a way to make it work. Like, it should not work, but it does. And I think it's because they wear white. I don't know. They have this allure that people just keep wanting to go to. But
that's it.
There is always that idea of, like, it won't be me this time. Surely I'll be the one that they'll value over the players.
Well,
like, Xabi Alonso has to have thought that. What's that?
I was saying that's athletes or people in, like, the athletic world. I just think they're wired differently.
I guess so. And so, like, it should not work. It's like a bumblebee that shouldn't be able to fly but can. It shouldn't be able to win the Champions League. It shouldn't be able to be as successful as it is. And somehow they find a way to make it work. So, yeah, they'll probably keep doing it and continue to win silverware. But it will just be a crazy-making thing for me because it just makes no sense and seems ultimately so toxic from top to bottom, with Perez, with the players, with, like, the board, and even the supporters. We talk about it all the time, how quickly the supporters will boo that team and be frustrated by that team and point fingers at players that don't really deserve it or have been faithful servants. It just seems like a thankless job that people keep signing up for.
Cha-ching, cha-ching. That's my
that'll do
first
it.
response. On the Klopp front, that would be wild to me. Like, that just wouldn't make any sense. Klopp is, I think, one of the most system-y kind of managers out there. I mean, that's just a bizarre thing to think about to me. And I think
my
that
point,
does
my
limit
point,
the
Joe,
pool.
is whenever someone takes a job as a coach, there's an amount of ego involved. There's an I can change this.
Like,
I'm the guy
true.
who can do this, right? So that's what drives anyone of that level to take a job at that level, right?
But I can
Yes,
think he'd
that's
be
true.
crazy for thinking that, which is where I am. Like, you're
Crazy
Agree
like
with
a
both of what you're
fox.
saying.
his two things, Jurgen Klopp, is like system,
Veneers.
as Joe veneers, and adverts for online travel
Trivago.
estates. No, his two things are it's like system and it's buy-in, like players who will die for you. And how are you going to get that at Real Madrid with this team anyway? Like, maybe he gets assurances that, okay, we're going to remold this squad in the summer and it'll be a Jurgen Klopp squad, but I just have no faith that he would get that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Can I say one thing about Klopp? And then I wanted to actually respond to what Taylor was saying because I thought that was very interesting. And that'll sort of tie a bow on my thoughts. In some of the reporting, and this is not intended to take shots at Fede Valverde, I'll be honest, I was a little disappointed that Valverde's name was popping up in the group of players that apparently took issue. I had just this view of Valverde that he's a soldier who's going to go do whatever it takes for the crest. And I don't know. My opinion of him has slightly changed as a result. Not really, because, I mean, I cannot confirm myself the veracity of the reporting. But
Joe,
that got me. That got me a little bit.
Is it possible that now that he has Bielsa as manager, he's like, I can't have this in both.
Only
One
one
has to be
obsessive
called.
coach at a time, please. I can't do this anymore. On Taylor's point about what you said, the sentiment of what you said about, this shouldn't work for Real Madrid, I agree with. Like, it is hilarious how unmodern they are. I know we've used that word a lot on today's show, but I think it's fitting. And how much success they've had. At the same time, I think you said it flies, something about Real Madrid and their success flies in the face of everything we know about modern sports, not just soccer. That point, I vehemently disagree with. And the reason for that is the thing that we've really learned about soccer, of all the analytics and everything that's out there, we've learned two things about soccer, especially in the modern age. Number one, if you spend at a rate that's higher than everybody else, dramatically higher, you will win games. Check. That's one modern takeaway for Real Madrid. Step two, if you get all the best players, you'll win games. Check. Step two. I mean, that is Real Madrid at their core. And they've been that before really most of these other clubs on the planet have been that. They've been one of the biggest, and they've used that to buy the best players. And ultimately, if you want a good foundation for winning soccer games, all of the data that we have, all of these giant data scouting departments, all the actual film watchers, all of that is done at all of these clubs to try to do what Real Madrid is doing. Not all of it, but to get the best players. That's what Brentford's doing. That's what Brighton's doing. Now they're trying to get the best players that they can go and sell and do all these extra things with. Real Madrid doesn't have to take it that far. But that's all what this is about, is finding the best players. And Real Madrid consistently find a group of the best players. How this one is constructed, questionable. I will absolutely grant that. But I don't think you have to squint to see why Real Madrid have been successful. I don't think you have to squint to see why they've won Champions Leagues in the modern era, despite being maybe the least modern big club. It's because in their own weird, unique way, they are the most modern team, because all of the things that we're trying to solve for, all the Barcelona data stuff, whatever, is to get to what these teams are doing, which is to assemble the best group of players possible.
They sign players at such a level that it almost doesn't matter whether
Exactly.
Florentino Perez knows much about the data of the sport. Like, they just sign the best players. What I do wonder
Man
is
United
if
tried
they-
that too, though, didn't they?
Well,
That's the problem.
this is the
Yeah,
point.
but Manchester United is bad at it. That's the difference.
And also, I was
would
actually going to
argue
come on to
so
this
is Madrid.
point. Manchester United are not signing players at that level. Like, they're
Exactly.
not signing
That's my point.
Mbappe. They're not signing Bellingham. They're spending a lot of money on good players, but they're not signing like the absolute tier one players in the
Right,
sport.
100% correct.
What I do wonder, how that changes is if Real Madrid have 4 or 5 seasons of not winning, and then even if that drops a little bit to the Manchester United level, that does start to have an impact. And we have seen this before with Real Madrid. Like, Joe, you're maybe slightly before your time with this sort of era of Real Madrid, but the Ramon Calderon era of Real Madrid, where they had gone like 4 years without winning. They went through that weird stretch of signing. Who did they sign? Jonathan Woodgate and Thomas Gravison.
Santiago Munez from the goal franchise.
That's right.
Yep.
Robinho, that was the Robinho era of Real Madrid, right?
Yeah.
They were a bad team at that point, and it took Perez coming back and selling Ronaldo and Benzema and Kaká on this restoration project to set them on this course that they're still on now. But that could come back. Like, I don't think Real Madrid can be complacent about the position that they're in, especially when there is a club in Catalonia that are just as attractive, who are the antithesis of everything that they are, and so players who would be in Real Madrid's radar will also be in Barcelona's radar in years gone forward. So there is a club out there that could, drink their, what's this saying? Lunch money. Is that a British thing?
Drink
the lunch money,
that's it.
maybe.
Yeah.
Milkshake.
Classic Brit spending all their lunch money on liquor.
I think like maybe this bridges the gap a little bit, but because like you're right, like spending money signing the best players tends to work and has worked for Madrid. But I think about like the Madrid teams that have been so successful in recent memory. And in my mind, those are teams that spend the most money on the areas of need. And so you need an amazing left back, you sign the best left back in the world. If you have deficiencies in the midfield, you sign Toni Kroos or you sign Luka Modric. You sign players that make sense and can play together. You don't sign 3 or 4 players who want to play roughly the same position and then think somebody will figure that out, I'm sure. That to me is where it stops making sense and feels much more like an ego check. It is we've got to remind everybody that we're the biggest like spender in the world, we're the biggest club in the world, so we're going to get Mbappe, we're going to get Jude Bellingham, we're going to get Rodrigo and Endrick, I guess. Like it feels like at some point they stop making the huge signings that are going to make a material difference across the board, and they start making huge signings to say they made those huge signings while not having like enough capable defenders to fill out a back line. And they did sign some players this summer. Don't get me wrong. They spent plenty of money to bring in that type of player. They just also don't really empower the manager to bring that player in and have them get regular, meaningful minutes such that you can build a cohesive squad. It just seems like the squad build has been really imbalanced for a couple seasons now. And I think that's where I agree with Graham. I think if it continues like that, I'm not sure it's just going to be better the next season because they brought in another Galactico and they've got somebody who doesn't mind if bigger egos are in charge.
All right. Well, we'll see. I mean, the past tells us maybe they've survived such things and done okay. So, Real Madrid, we can't figure them out. We spent an hour talking about them. We can't figure them out, basically, is where we're at.
Who do we think gets this job in the summer? It's not going to be Arbeloa. Like, it'll be a big name manager. Honestly, I'm really struggling to think.
Because I mean,
Ruben Amorim.
If you create it though, like who is the person that we think of as being like at the very least a blend of like has a philosophy and style, but also can smoke a cigar and cock an eyebrow like Carlo Ancelotti? Like who can
David
be?
Moyes.
It's Klopp.
Jose Mourinho.
It's not Klopp because Klopp has like you have to play this way, you have to press, you have to be like even if he backs it off
cigar.
and adjusts it a little bit, there's still a like he wants you to play ultimately a certain way that you have to play for his approach to work. At least that's my understanding of Klopp. I'm trying to think like honestly like is it Eddie Howe who's like sure we can find a way to make these pieces work? Like I mean that isn't it, but I'm trying to think who is the manager? Like is it Vincent Kompany? Who like can come in and manage egos and get people to play well, but like is it married to a tactical style?
Southgate.
I mean, Nagelsmann gets fired from Bayern for this exact thing, right? Like for being. Go ahead.
This is back to my point of like, who is that person? Because that goes against the grain of the rest of modern soccer. Like finding another Ancelotti, like Ancelotti could be out of. Honestly, don't think it's out of the question that Ancelotti becomes Real Madrid manager.
Third time.
Yeah, why not? Why not? That's the solution if they're going to get back to basics and stick with their DNA, which is about winning, and hiring Ancelotti for a third time. That is the big thing. I'm sure we could talk about this for another hour or so, but we're going to wrap it there. Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed for your contributions here.
My pleasure. I'm stuck on Vincent Kompany. I feel like it's Vincent Kompany. That's my answer. Didn't think I would be there after being like, he's a terrible manager, but here we are. Real Madrid make crazy sane, so the sane answer is crazy? Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Stranger things have happened. Graham Ruthven, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
Joe Lowry, thank you very much.
Vinicius Jr.'s favorite confidant will be the next manager. Thanks, Ryan.
Oh, who's that?
Neymar.
I have no idea.
Perez.
I don't know his family situation. I didn't know if I should say dad or mom or what the deal is. I don't know anything about the dude other than that he plays soccer and whines a lot.
Social media manager. Maybe it's that.
Yeah, that works. That's fine.
Great. That works. Excellent. Listener, thank you very much for joining us on The Big Thing. If you have anything to say about Real Madrid and their coaching situation, join us in our Discord, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. We'll see you there. But for now, bye.